Hey guys, so I'm sure that you have seen this soldering iron all over the place, from Instagram, Facebook to YouTube, people using it constantly. But honestly, I find that there is like zero information out there on how to use this thing and how to use it safely. So this video today is all about how to use this soldering iron safely, because a little bit later, we're gonna do a heat test on how hot this bad boy actually gets, so stick around to find out. I'm going to share some of my accidents and whoopsies with using the soldering iron. So be sure to comment below on all of your whoopsies and mistakes that you did, so that I know that I'm not alone in making all of these silly, dumb choices with this darn soldering iron. Now is a great time also to hit that like and subscribe button so you're not missing any future videos. All right, so this is essentially a soldering iron, but really what it is it's from Japanese and Russian flower making, silk flower making, and it gets ridiculously hot, and it comes with a ridiculously large amount of tips that you can change out. Don't worry, this is totally off right now, not even plugged in, because that is part of the safetiness of this sucker gets hot. So don't hurt yourself. This was created for silk flower making, but a lot of makers in the flower world have converted it to using it for felt. So I want to go over the safety tips of this, because it is definitely a really, really helpful tool, but it is also incredibly intimidating because of the fact that it gets so hot, and it can be quite dangerous if you're not using it correctly. Let's quickly talk to you about how there is like zero information out there. So when I bought my fabric flower maker, this is all I got, these two pieces of paper. And as you can see, they're exactly the same photos, and half of it's in English, half of it's in another language, literally just the tips that are included, and it's not even all the tips. Some temperature gauges and a few just safety things on how to start. Other than that, that's it. They give you zero information. And that was one of the things when I got this, and I was just like, oh my goodness, what do I do with this? And I definitely made a lot of mistakes. I definitely burned a hole in my carpet, and I don't want you to do that. So let's talk about how to safely use this tool. I've got my lamp here, and this is a very key tool that I use when I am working with this. It may sound weird and crazy, but you'll totally understand in a minute when I get to why I have my little lamp here. First off, your soldering iron or flower maker, or whatever we want to call this, comes with this metal piece. So when this came in my kit, I had no idea what to do with it, and I found some different instructions. And basically you just attach it to the base of your soldering gun at the very bottom. I wish that it would almost come with it already attached so you know what you're doing, but this is the safety for you drop it, you put it down, that this tip is never going to go onto any surface that you have it. So make sure that you have this safety ring around your iron. I've seen other makers not have this attached, and I could see why you don't if some people are a little confused on what the heck it is, because there's not a lot of instructions out there, but it's definitely meant to go around your iron so that it literally can roll around and you could drop it and it's never going to hit the hot piece to your surface. But I have seen people lean up their tools against their iron and use it kind of like as a stand. Totally fine. I just would highly recommend actually installing it around your iron. That way, it's another safety measure that this ridiculously hot tip is not going to touch any of your surfaces and cause a problem. So now let's chat about the lamp. So the first thing I do when I use this iron is I always anchor my cable. So this specific lamp has a really, really heavy base. So I know this isn't like, it's gonna take quite a bit of force to yank this lamp off of my table. This one specifically meant when it has a camera attachment and a light so that I could, film top-down stuff, but also it's just a great little light. But what I use it for is to wrap my cable around it. You could use whatever you have that's just strong and heavy. This is just what I have. Another option for anchoring your cable would be just, this is like a woodworking squeeze clamp. Great, you just attach your cable to the side of your desk or whatever you're working on and pinch it down so that way it doesn't fall off. So what I do is I literally just wrap my cable around my base like so, and then plug it in. And then I still have access to the control panel here, which is definitely your temperature gauge on how to turn it on. But the reason I do this is because You do not want to be tripping over your cables and cords. When I'm working with, say, my glue gun, I have a long dangly cord that if I just turn my chair or I walk by it, I can easily rip my glue gun off of my table, and I have done it countless times, but I just quickly grab it. The tip of that glue gun is not getting as nearly as hot as this will.
Future Lisa here. So the paperwork that it comes with totally says that it gets up to 600 degrees, but I'm skeptical. Wait till the end to find out what it really gets to.
So that is a massive heat difference as far as safety of my glue gun falling off my table versus this falling off my table. This keeps your cord from not dangling and away from you. The reason I also do that is because if for whatever reason this drops and it falls down here, I also make sure that the length of the cable when it drops, it is dangling and it physically cannot touch anything around it. So if it drops, it's like it could swing back and forth, but it is not touching anything. It's not gonna touch the floor, it's not gonna touch me, it's not gonna touch a cabinet, a drawer, whatever. I make sure that this amount of wire is the perfect amount of dangle length. Whenever I'm using this tool, I like to stand up as well, because if I'm sitting and it falls, I can't like move, or usually when you're sitting, the first reaction if something like this falls is to bat it away with your hand. Or if it lands on you, you're gonna bat it away with your hand. And that is gonna cause burns from landing on you and burns on your hand as you bat it away. So I prefer standing, because if I'm standing, I can literally just like physically hop out of the way real quick, then let the pendulum swing, slow down, grab my tool again, and go back to using it. So those are just some really minor things that I think are super important, especially if you have kids, dogs, pets, whatever. For instance, if I have this heat tool on, my children know they're not allowed in my office. I do not like to be distracted. I do not like them rushing in or running in. If they do ask, I'm always just like, hot tool! And they're like, oh, okay. And then they kind of freeze and they take a step back, because I have a sweet little 4-year-old that likes to just come in here all the time and just be like, hug! And the rule is, if you ask for a hug, you get a hug. I definitely have to have just strong language and words of hot tool, and they're like, okay, I stop and freeze. I do not want any accidents with me or them. It's a little bit tricky with my dog because she likes to sleep in my bed, or sleep in my office. So she has a little bed, and every once in a while she'll kind of come around. And so I also like it anchored so that she can't, you know, get tangled in a cord and rip it off while I'm working too. Be sure to create an environment that is also very safe. I hope this video isn't here to intimidate you or scare you from using this tool. I hope that this video's purpose is to allow you to use this tool more confidently. So that's the goal here, is to learn how to set up your environment properly so that you can use it more confidently and don't be scared of it. So let's go over all of these tips real quick. So depending on what set you get, there's a lot of different sets out there. Some come with a lot of tips, some come with very few tips. You can buy tips separately. It is recommended, look, there's even another one hiding in here. And you can kind of see, like these ones I've used, because they're definitely just different colors and they've definitely been heated up. And then like this one I've never used, and it's nice and shiny and new. It comes with a lot of tips. So when using this, the preferred method is to always turn off your iron before you change your tips. That being said, I know we're all impatient and we don't want to let it cool off and then heat back up, and that's annoying, and who wants to wait? I don't recommend it, but if you are going to change your tips, it is doable. What I like to do is have a heat-safe surface. So this is just a cookie sheet. I like to have a rimmed line cookie sheet. That way nothing can roll off, because one time I changed my tip, and this is why I get nervous about changing hot tips, is that I put it on my granite counter, which is my desk. When I laid my tip down, it literally just rolled right off of my table. And I was able to jump out of the way, so that wasn't a problem, but it was scorching hot and literally melted a hole in my carpet. It just went, I just like that melted plastic carpet smell, and it just sank. And I was just like freaking out, and I mean, I cleaned it as best as I could, but you can still see some like burned carpet marks on here. For a second, I thought I was gonna burn my house down because it got bright red, my carpet got bright red, and everything was melting and it just sank in like 2 seconds. And I was just like freaking out for a second. So The only thing I was able to do safely at that point was I grabbed my needle nose pliers, picked it up as carefully as I could, and stuck it back on my desk in a way that it could not roll off again. So please learn from my mistakes and make sure that if you are gonna take them off and you are gonna set them somewhere, heat-safe surface and something that has a lip on it. If this is hot, the way that you change it, and this is how you would change it if it wasn't hot too, you would literally just turn this little wing nut. So I did it with my hand, but I'll show you. You can easily do it with your pliers as well, because this wing nut gets just as hot as this tip does. Use your pliers to carefully take this wing nut off, and then you're gonna put it in your tray, and then you can simply lift out your tip into your tray, and then continue to use your pliers for putting in a new tip as well, because you don't want your fingers anywhere near here. Also keep in mind on these tips, they have a flat part on all of them, on every single one. So that is the part that when you're putting it in, is you want to line up for your wing nut to come against this flat part so that it gets a really, really good hold and it won't slip or turn or twist. So now we're gonna take our wing nut and put it right back in here. And then again, you could use your pliers. If it's hot, you're gonna use your pliers. And then just twist it and take your time. And you're just gonna literally go finger tight. You don't wanna over tighten it and like strip any of your threads, and you just wanna make sure it's definitely finger tight, and then you can even do a pull test and it's like, this thing's not going anywhere. So when using your tool, my kit came with a foam pad and a piece of cotton fabric. Some of these tools I've noticed don't come with this, so you can just get yourself a foam pad and a piece of white cotton fabric. Mine is kind of dyed pink right now because I have curled a bunch of petals already on it that had some pink dye on it, and because of the heat, it just transferred. It still works, and honestly, I haven't seen any problems with future petals transferring on this, but I could easily just change this cloth out whenever I want. Another safety tip too is to get this cotton cloth just slightly damp. This step is not necessarily like necessary to curl your petals. I do find though that rapidly cooling on a cool cloth with the heat on one side and then rapidly cooling it actually helps with the curling method. It kind of sets that heat really quickly, and the fibers are like hot and cold at the same time. And so it kind of like shocks it into like accepting the curl quickly. I've curled with it not damp, also works just fine, but I kind of prefer having my cloth just a little damp. I also use it to check the temperature of my iron to make sure that it's ready to go. There is no signal on this saying I'm hot enough. There's no way of knowing without actually just trying it, and you're certainly not gonna touch it. So what I do is I kind of go on my wet, damp cloth, and if I hear that sizzle sizzle, then I'm like, all right, it's hot, it's ready to go. I also wanted to show this as well. I removed a tip, and I was just not thinking at all, thinking like, oh, I'm gonna remove this really, really hot tip. My cloth is really cool and damp. It'll be totally fine. I set my tip right on top of my fabric, and within seconds, it just sliced right through it, went right through it, and I was just like, oh my goodness, don't do that again. Don't ever put hot tips directly on here. I definitely will do like the sizzle test, but it's really, really quickly. It's not like shoving my thing in there. Be very, very mindful what you're doing with your hot tips after you're done with them. Okay, so let's talk about desired temperature. This is the control unit. So on here, it shows, it's very, very hard to see on mine, and every single time that I do it, I'm literally like looking at it this close because I can't see. So mine is all in Celsius. Obviously I'm in the US, we use Fahrenheit, so I usually have to convert it. When I turn it on, I turn it usually to about 240 degrees Celsius. The mistakes that I made when I first started, I would go to the max. Stupid hot. Don't ever go that hot. I usually go around 240. So when I first started and I went all the way to the max, I definitely burned my felt a few times. And that was very frustrating because you're putting all this time and effort of cutting it and dyeing it, and then you're finally going to curling it and you're just like, I just burned it. And it definitely makes some burn brown marks, and it's not pretty, and you're like, great, now I have to throw it away and start all over. And So it gets a little bit frustrating. So try not to go as hot as you can and just kind of experiment with your different temperatures and your different materials so that way you can get it perfect for you. I would always start cooler and then work your way and get hotter and hotter until you're getting the desired effects. With this iron, I am only using a wool blend felt or a wool felt. Do not use acrylic felt. It will 100% melt on you and gum up your tips and just ruin it. So just don't even go there. Make sure that you're using quality felt. Link below in my shop if you want to snag some of the felt that I use. All right, so we tested everything with our thermal heat gun and we got some interesting results. So technically it shows on the little dial that it gets up to about 320, I think, and then it stops and then it shows like max. So I'm just kind of like gauging with the gauge on there that it's probably about 350 degrees Celsius. Or that could be in Fahrenheit, which would make sense with the readings that we got. But very confusing. There's little to no information on this and in the instructions, so who knows? So our hottest reading for the barrel was about 315-ish, 320-ish, which would make sense if this was in Fahrenheit. And then the hottest we got on the round tip, the larger version of this guy, we got it up to about 115, 120 degrees on the outside of the ball. And then on this small tip, this sucker is still on actually. I'll just do it right now. What do we got? What do we got? We are at 303. That's still really ridiculously hot and ridiculously too hot for your felt flowers. Tone it down, go back to around like 230 degrees. When I set my thermometer to around the 240 to 260 range in there, it was a good temperature. And that's what I put my curling iron on when I'm using that. It's around 240. So I think this might be in Fahrenheit. I'm just gonna go with that because first of all, 600 degrees is stupid hot and there's no reason for it to get that hot. Let me know if you were surprised by that in the comments. I certainly was. Keep in mind too, when you're working with these bigger ball units that it is more to heat up. It took about 10 minutes for this one to get up to heat, whereas this little guy took like 2 minutes. Please drop questions below. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to be there for you, and let's figure this tool out together. All right, thanks guys. Catch you next time.